We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the 2020 Hall of Fame class that was announced earlier today. We have some Montreal Canadiens trade rumors to take a look at. Flyers forward Oskar Lindblom has been back on the ice, and we have some updates on the NHL's return to play. We'll jump into all of today's news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover today, so let's dive right in. First up, a couple of quick hits. Philadelphia Flyers forward Oskar Lindblom has returned to the ice and has been seen skating with some of his Flyers teammates, which is an incredibly encouraging sign. Unfortunately, Lindblom still a ways away from being able to play hockey. He will not be competing in the 24-team playoff format. He has still not done his treatments, which he's seeking, of course, for a rare form of bone cancer. Of course, he's been a real trooper, battling hard, and certainly had quite a lot of support from around the NHL, but it's just great to see that he's actually able to get this far so far. So great news on Oskar Lindblom, and we certainly wish him the best as he continues his recovery. Now, a couple of quick updates as well on the NHL return to play in the hub cities. Of course, we saw not too long ago that the Tampa Bay Lightning had to close down their facility due to multiple positive tests for COVID-19 amongst its team and staff. They were able to reopen effective today, so that's good news on their part. Of course, the players that were not impacted were able to resume training, of course, which is very important for the return to play, for them to be ready. Of course, right now they're in phase 2, which is voluntary, but we're looking at around July the 10th for NHL training camps to begin for the phase 3 portion. So many NHL players are either already back in their NHL cities or they will be heading back here shortly so that they can quarantine for 14 days if necessary before training camp begins. Of course, all the rules are depending on where they're traveling from and all that. So we're seeing many guys, especially European players, or many of them are on their way back here in this coming days. So we should be getting closer to NHL teams having a full complement of players here relatively soon. Now, of course, on the hub city, though, there was an update from Elliot Friedman today indicating that the Vancouver bid to be a host city apparently has ran into some sort of snag, but he was trying to get more details on what exactly that snag was. So, of course, we didn't really find out any more information, at least as of the recording of this video. If anything else comes to light between now and the next couple of hours before this is posted, and I'll certainly leave it in the pinned comments, so check that if there's any additional info that comes out. But obviously Vancouver has been one of the leading contenders along with Edmonton and Vegas. Of course, that was the last report just in the last couple of days that they were the top 3 contenders. We do have official confirmation that they're down to 6 teams out of the original 10 that are still in the running, including Toronto, Edmonton, and Vancouver in Canada, and Vegas, along with Chicago and Los Angeles in the United States. So, of course, one thing that Friedman mentioned is he wasn't sure if this snag was specifically a Vancouver or a BC thing or a particular rule that's around their bid, or if it's something to do with, it's a Canada-wide thing. He really didn't know, but I'd be surprised if it's a Canada thing, just because we already had confirmation from the Canadian federal government that the players coming in for their NHL camps would not have to follow the 14-day quarantine, that they could be considered basically isolated on their own amongst their team bubbles that they're going to be in. So really, other than that, it's kind of up to the individual city or provincial governments to kind of set any rules that they want around the players in the NHL being in their provinces or cities. So I would think that whatever the snag is, that it's specifically related to Vancouver. But I know one thing that I had seen was that for families, for NHL players that are going to be hosted in that city, that they would be completely that they're welcome to visit the city, but they'd be in a completely separate bubble, and they may not be able to visit their family, even though they're going to be in the same city. So I know for a lot of NHL players that was a problem. So maybe that's what it is. I'm not really sure, but we'll wait for Friedman or other NHL insiders to get us more information on that here soon. But hopefully the NHL gets this sorted out, because I know they really were hoping to have an announcement made within the next couple of days at most, so they could start negotiating hotels and start to get details finalized. Big news in Calgary as well in regards to their new arena. Of course, we saw earlier during the 1920 season that they did come to an agreement to build a new arena, and we had more details emerge today that construction is set to begin in August of 2021. So next summer, construction will begin. It's expected to take about 3 years to be completed. So that puts it in 2024. So the 2024-25 season would be when it would be set to open. At least that's the current projections. I mean, to have 3 years for the arena to go from start to finish is very reasonable based on what we've seen in recent other buildings that have gone up. So barring some other world events here, I don't foresee them running into too many other issues. But obviously with everything going on right now, it's probably wise that they start a little bit later on. Hopefully by August 2021, this pandemic is long gone and we can kind of get back to what we used to call normal life here. But that's good news for Calgary to have some more firm construction plans to be moving forward here to get this new arena up and going. Well, today was Hockey Hall of Fame announcement day. So we get to learn who the 2020 inductees would be. Of course, a couple of these players were really no surprises, but a couple of them were somewhat surprising in my opinion. Of course, the 2020 class will be led by longtime Calgary Flame forward and captain Jarome Iginla, who was a first ballot, no-brainer Hall of Famer. He definitely had himself a Hall of Fame career. I have absolutely no issues with Iginla being selected. That's a pretty well the one for sure thing that everybody knew about this class, that he would be the biggest star in it for sure. I mean, Iginla scored over 600 goals, had 1,300 points exactly, had a tremendous career overall, played for multiple teams near the end of his career. Of course, he assisted on Sidney Crosby's golden goal to win the gold medal for Canada in the Olympics, represented his country numerous times as well, and obviously, like I said, no issues with Jarome Iginla at all as a Hockey Hall of Famer. Another first ballot Hall of Famer inducted today was longtime NHL player Marian Hossa, who of course got started with the Ottawa Senators, bounced around a bit, played a lot with Chicago near the end of his career. Of course, his contract is still currently held by the Arizona Coyotes as of the final year of it. Marian Hossa has not been able to play for the last few years due to a degenerative skin condition, which has prevented him from playing. So technically he's eligible, even though he's also under contract. Only the second player since Chris Pronger for that to actually take place due to the fact they finished their careers on long-term injury reserve. Now, another quick note I forgot to mention as well in Jarome Iginla is he's the first black skater to be inducted as a player in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's the first skater non-goaltender for that distinction, so that's a pretty impressive feat for him, of course. And even though Hossa was inducted today, I'm somewhat surprised. I didn't think that was a slam dunk for sure thing going to happen, even though I have no issues with him being in there. He's got over 500 goals. He appeared in 3 consecutive Stanley Cup finals with 3 different teams, which is certainly a rare feat. Of course, he played for Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Chicago before finally winning the cup with Chicago. Went on to win 2 more cups with them during his run there. Obviously, like I said, his run with Chicago, from a Stanley Cup perspective at least, was the most successful. But of course, he had a tremendous career, solid two-way hockey player, one of the few players from Slovakia as well to be entered into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So certainly a very deserving career, another first ballot Hall of Famer. Of course, we also saw a couple of former defensemen that are now current NHL general managers. Doug Wilson, of course, has been with the Sharks for, it seems like, forever and eternity here. Of course, he played a long time with the Chicago Blackhawks, was a really solid defenseman, won himself a Norris Trophy. He finished in the top 5 in balloting for the Norris Trophy on 3 other occasions as well. He put up over 800 points in just a little over 1,000 games, had himself a really solid career, was a dominant defenseman during his heyday. Of course, when the Sharks came in as an expansion team, he went over, finished out his career there, and after retirement became their general manager and role now for feels like an eternity. But Doug Wilson is certainly another player who's been passed over numerous times, but in my opinion, I have no issues with him being in there. And we also have Kevin Lowe, who played mostly with the Edmonton Oilers, won 5 Stanley Cups, of course, was part of the Rangers Cup in '94 as well with Mark Messier. Kevin Lowe himself even said he didn't see himself as a Hall of Famer and was very surprised. And out of all the players inducted today, Kevin Lowe to me was the most surprising and probably the only one I really have issue with. If you take a look at some other players around the NHL that got snubbed today and have been snubbed now on multiple occasions, especially a guy like Alexander McGillney. McGillney was a trailblazer, the first defector to come over from Russia, had a remarkable rookie season. McGillney put up over 1,000 points in just a little bit less than 1,000 games. Had a 76-goal season in there. Won himself a Lady Byng trophy as well. Was an all-star on numerous occasions. McGillney, to me, is a terrific player. He keeps getting overlooked. I'm very surprised. I think the Hall of Fame should be somewhat embarrassed that he's not in there as of yet, really, in my opinion. He's really deserves it. Of course, you get Daniel Alfredsson for the 4th straight year as well, was also snubbed. Alfie had a tremendous career. Doesn't have a lot lot of personal hardware. He was a Calder Trophy winner, and I can't help but wonder if maybe that might be the only thing holding him back, because really, statistically speaking, from an offensive standpoint, in fact, he was highly regarded as a two-way player as well. I think he really deserves to be there more than at least a few other players that have been inducted in recent years, I guess we can say. But you've also got some other really solid guys that deserve to be there too, like a Rod Brindamore. You get Keith Tkachuk, who's probably somewhat debatable, but still had himself an awesome career. He's still eligible, but not in there. You get longtime goalie Tom Barrasso, one of the best American-born goaltenders in NHL history. He's not in there. When it comes to goalies, they seem to have a really difficult time nowadays. There's a lot of goalies that are kind of debatable. Were they really good? Were they great? Or are they Hall of Fame? There's all kinds of different levels, and it's certainly somewhat subjective. I'd like to see the Hall of Fame voting process be a little bit more transparent and a little bit more public. Everything's done behind closed doors, and I'm not suggesting anything fishy is going on or anything that really needs to be investigated or anything of that nature. I would just like to see some more transparency and understand how they come to their decisions a little bit more than what they did. Maybe hear some of the comments and reasons why the votes go the way they do, because sometimes they're just completely mind-boggling, and there's certainly, like I said, a case to be made for some of these guys that have been overlooked numerous times now. Rounding out the 2020 Hockey Hall of Fame class is Kim St. Pierre, of course, a dominant women's goaltender, represented Canada multiple times on a variety of international events. She certainly deserves her place in the Hall of Fame. And going in as a builder is Ken Holland, of course, the current manager of the Edmonton Oilers, longtime general manager of the Detroit Red Wings. He's worked in the NHL for an eternity, and certainly put in a lot of hard work over the years, and I have no issue with him in the builder category. Personally, I was kind of hoping to see longtime NHL executive and former Ottawa Senators GM Brian Murray get inducted. I thought he was due. Of course, he passed away a few years ago, and certainly put in a lot of effort as well. I thought he was somebody that should be under consideration, but obviously I have no problem with Ken Holland in that category. He as well has put in a lot of years as an NHL executive and certainly deserves his recognition. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have the Montreal Canadiens trade rumor I want to take a look at. This comes from a Sportsnet article from Eric Engels in a mailbag article where he was asked some more questions. He talked a lot about what to expect from Montreal in the playoff coming up here. In their series against the Pittsburgh Penguins, what he expects their lineup to look like, what kind of matchups, all that kind of stuff. But one of the questions he was asked that I found interesting, I wanted to get everybody's opinion on here today from one of the readers. Could he see the Montreal Canadiens and Marc Bergevin making a play to obtain Columbus Blue Jacket forward Josh Anderson? Now, Josh Anderson is a pending restricted free agent. Of course, this year really was not a good year for Anderson. He had a terrible season from an offensive perspective, even though he's had a pretty good young career. This year was a bit of a write-off. He ended up having season-ending shoulder surgery. He's not going to be recovered from that enough time to play for the playoffs, which is unfortunate. It'd be a good opportunity for him to kind of redeem himself and get his season back on track, finish stronger, especially where he's in a contract year. Of course, we saw Anderson have fairly contentious negotiations last time around with the Blue Jackets. Had a bit of a holdout, but ended up signing and getting everything looked after. He's making $1.85 million. Of course, he's a big guy, 6'3", about 225 pounds, can play a very physical game. We saw last year in the playoffs that he could be a dominant force and be a really solid power forward. This is certainly, like I said, a down year, a bit of a write-off. Before that, the last 3 or 4 years, he's been very productive, and like I said, plays a unique style of game. It would be a unique player that Montreal does not have. The Habs have a lot of smaller, speedy, quick forwards with a lot of skill, and he would bring them a lot of size and strength, and to go along with somebody who can have that net front presence and play a very different style of game. So it could be a great benefit. I mean, if I'm Marc Bergevin and I know that he's available, I'm certainly interested, but it really is going to boil down to what is the cost and what kind of contract am I going to be expected to give this guy, because he's an RFA. He's, like I said, coming off a terrible season from an offensive perspective. I mean, yes, you could say injuries might have been a major cause of that, but his stats leading up to the injury were not good. So you can't help but wonder what else was going on with Anderson this year. And the article talks about that leading into the trade deadline, there was some talk that he could be available, but the question around the league was what's going on with him? Why were his numbers so bad this year before the injury took place? So if you're going to acquire him after that, that's sending a message that you have a lot of faith in him, which means that he's likely going to be looking for a decent amount of term and money, and that's probably not something that Marc Bergevin should do. If he can get him for a decent price and give him a shorter term prove-it contract, that might be something to consider. But the big thing here with Anderson is that he's 1 year removed from being a UFA. So depending on what he gets for a contract, if he only gets a 1 or 2 year contract, you're going to be at risk to having to pay him a lot more money if it works out, or you might lose him for nothing. It might be a waste of an asset if things don't work out and you don't get him for a short term. I guess kind of you have to weigh out the risk reward in that scenario. But would he sign a shorter term contract? Hard to say. Given the fact that the market's going to be down a bit because of the cap and everything going on with the league and the pause and the lost revenue, he may not have a choice but to accept a shorter term contract that's not going to pay him a whole lot of money just to kind of reprove himself after a poorly performance this year. But obviously, like Engels talks about in this article, what's the asking price going to be? He even suggests if the asking price was straight up Josh Anderson for Max Domi, that he probably wouldn't do it. And to be honest, I was surprised that he thought that might be the asking price. If Jarmo Kekalainen calls Marc Bergevin and offers up Josh Anderson straight up right now, based on where things are at, 1-for-1 for Max Domi, I would hope Marc Bergevin would laugh and hang up the phone. But of course, we've seen things work out before with these 1-for-1 deals for Montreal. They're kind of in a situation where the Domi for Galchenyuk deal, even though it didn't look good at the time, at least in my opinion, worked out beautifully. But then if you look at other deals that they had in the past, like the Drouin for Sergachev deal, that's not looking so good right now. So, you have to be careful in these situations, and I don't think that would be a deal, at least I would hope, that the Montreal Canadiens would not make. But of course, if it's a different kind of player, maybe we're looking at more of a Drouin type of player or something else, or maybe they're looking at some future assets. Montreal does have all kinds of draft picks. Montreal does have a pretty good prospect pool. If they're willing to move future assets like that in a combo package for Josh Anderson and you can get him to sign a decent contract, well, you know what? I would probably do that deal all day long because it adds a completely different element to my lineup and it allows me to kind of rehab a player who's had a down year, and if I can get him for a cheap price and turn him into a 25 to 30 consistent power forward goal scorer for my team, then I'll take that risk to see if I can make it happen. But like I said, it really boils down to the price tag. But given the fact that he's an RFA and needs a new contract, wouldn't be surprising if he was traded, that it would be a draft day kind of trade, and that's a perfect kind of deal for Montreal with all the picks they have. If they could offer Columbus multiple picks, maybe throw in a prospect, then that's probably the kind of deal that Bergevin should consider making. Like I said, because he's such a different player, if you get him for the right price, I would do it. But if it's an asking price is somebody like Domi or even Giraffe, maybe, I don't think you do that. It's just too risky given the season that he's just had. So let me know what your thoughts are on the possibility of Montreal and Josh Anderson. Should he be a player they pursue, and what would you be comfortable with for a trade or asking price to make it happen? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.